A city demands answers after dozens are killed in Kaohsiung's deadliest fire. Preparing for the worst, a show of force from Taiwan's counter-terrorism unit. Linked in, unlinks from China, how navigating Beijing censorship laws became just too challenging. Under Siege, a Taiwan exhibition delves into how it felt to be swept up in one of the most dramatic moments of the Hong Kong protests. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Investigations are underway into a fatal fire in the southern port city of Kaohsiung, which resulted in the death of at least 46 people. 2 suspects are being questioned by the police. As William Yin reports, the city's mayor has apologised, promising to take responsibility and conduct a thorough inspection of current fire safety standards.
This was the scene on Thursday as firefighters battled the blaze engulfing a 40-year-old building in Kaohsiung. The fire at the 13-story Chen Zongcheng building was the deadliest in the city's history, claiming dozens of lives and injuring many people. The mayor, Chen Qimai, led his deputies, the heads of the city's police and health departments, in an apology as an act of contrition to the victims, their families, and the citizens of Kaohsiung.
对于盐城区城中城大楼今天的大火，造成重大人命伤亡，我感到无比的悲痛，深切的自责。在这里要向所有的患者以及罹难者家属以及所有的市民朋友致上最沉痛的道歉。
Friends and family members of the deceased rushed to the mortuary to get a last glimpse of their loved ones.
已经有那个公费的那个塔位，对这些那个家属也有一点责任。
Disaster management experts warned that the general disrepair of many old buildings and lack of adequate fire safety planning increase the possibility of such tragedies occurring.
可能住的是弱势族群。第二个，它的设备相对也会比较老旧，它的建材也会比较老旧。当这些不利的条件综合起来的时候，我们就会发现，老旧建筑它可能发生火警的时候呢，它可能蔓延的速度会比较快。
黄海岛说，如果发现浓烟，你可能没办法逃出去，我们可能要逃生不及，我们就要留在原地做避难。可是如果你门开出去，已经确定外面都没有浓烟，所以你就可以什么，赶快去做避难逃生。
Over 18,000 residential fires were reported in Taiwan between 2018 and 2020, killing a total of 313 people. While the cause of Thursday's fire is still under investigation, the tragedy looks set to shine a spotlight on the country's building safety regulations. Patrick Chen, Alice Chen, and William Yen for TaiwanPlus.
The National Police Agency's Counter-Terrorism Training Center in Taiwan showcased their latest maneuvers in a drill monitored by legislative councillors. James Chater has this report on the elite unit's exercises.
An unsettling scene, but this hostage situation is just a drill. To improve the police's ability to respond to terrorist attacks and other major events, the National Police Agency's Counter-Terrorism Training Center conducts a variety of exercises and simulations. The anti-terrorism drills were showcased to a legislative committee in Taoyuan on Thursday. Special operations teams and police joined forces for the exercises. The unit's new bulletproof armoured vehicles and tactical assault trucks were on display.
这一次呢，我们特别对立法院的内政委员会来展现我们训练的成果，也希望能让内委会的委员们、国会可以来清楚我们反恐训练中心在整个一个训练的计划。
Chen also responded to criticisms of the infrequent practices, He said that individual units had to train separately first before taking part in joint exercises at the centre. He also emphasised that the centre's drills demonstrate the Special Forces' commitment to fighting crime. Bill Kong and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Microsoft has announced that it is shutting down services for LinkedIn in China. For several years, the professional networking site operated a separate, censored version for users in China. Many academics, journalists and others were told that their profiles and posts would not be visible in China. This policy enabled LinkedIn to become the last major Western social media platform still operating there. But Microsoft now says that complying with Beijing's requirements has become too challenging. To learn more, our reporter Reinhold Kilpatrick spoke to Swedish journalist Joje Holsen, whose profile was blocked by LinkedIn China.
I had my profile for several years, and then all of a sudden in June this year, I got an email from LinkedIn saying that they will restrict the access to my profile in China because they found some problems under my education section. They didn't specify what those problems was, but I suspect that I posted my academic experience, and there I also had an essay about the Tiananmen Square massacre. So that's probably the reason. And in this email, LinkedIn also said that they were willing to work together with me so that my profile could be visible in China again, which actually means that they were offering to help me to censor my own academic background.
LinkedIn has been called the last man standing in China, the only major Western social media platform still accessible there because it was willing to censor itself. So now that LinkedIn China is going, do you think this decisively signals the end of an era?
I think this era that you're talking about, it's ended a long time ago. It already ended when Facebook, Google, Twitter, YouTube, and all of those platforms left China, because LinkedIn's presence in China has been so small and without any impact at all when it comes to changes of information between Chinese and Western users. So I would think that the era is already ended a long time ago.
LinkedIn has clung on this long because it was willing to censor itself. It created a separate version of its website just for the China market that censored sensitive information. So what do you think its ultimate failure tells us about this model?
I think the fact that no other company or no other social media platform took after this model during those 7 years, it really showed the problems. It's not sustainable to follow Chinese government's orders to have a presence in China, because once you start self-censoring, there will be no end to it. There will only be bigger and bigger demands from the Chinese side. Once you start listening to this kind of censorship demands, there is no way back. There will only be harder and harder demands.
The United States has rejoined the UN Human Rights Council after an absence of 3 years. The UN General Assembly elected the US to the 47-member group, along with 12 other new members and 5 existing members. The move fulfills a pledge by President Joe Biden to re-engage with the UN on human rights issues. The Trump administration quit the council in 2018. It accused the UN body of bias against Israel and failing to address human rights abuses by other member countries. As the landmark UN Environmental Conference in Kunming wraps up, a new declaration calls on governments to put political will into action. So far, over 100 countries have signed the so-called Kunming Declaration, which implores governments to put biodiversity at the heart of policy making. But environmentalists warn it may not go far enough, as the declaration is not legally binding. At the conference, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged over $232 million for a new biodiversity fund to help projects in developing nations. Despite hosting the conference and declaring China's commitment to the environment, there are questions on whether the president will attend the crucial United Nations COP26 climate gathering in Glasgow at the end of the month.
without the Chinese cooperation, that it is almost impossible to reduce the kind of the level of pollution that we are having today. So rather than a Chinese and active cooperation, it's actually the China is the biggest damager and the polluters and actions. But without China's active in participations, that the problem will continue to just get worse.
China and Bhutan have signed a memorandum of understanding as part of what the two sides are calling a three-step roadmap for expediting boundary negotiations. It will raise concerns in India, which is currently locked into a border dispute with China. Over the past week, there have been skirmishes between the two sides along the so-called line of actual control in India's Ladakh region. The latest round of high-level military talks failed to diffuse tensions along the disputed borders. The two countries say their troop deployments in the region have reached their highest level in decades. To discuss more about India and China's dispute and the China-Bhutan border talks, I spoke to Viresh Kanduri, a fellow at Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Bhutan and China engaged in boundary question or boundary negotiations from almost 1984. We haven't seen any resolution coming from that since last 3 decades. At least, like personally, I believe that the boundary question between China and Bhutan is not going to have any optimistic end, even though they have an MOU, because given the current state of affairs concerning China with any other countries in the region, it's very belligerent, high aggression, unreasonable and unjustifiable belligerence in the border. So Bhutan, I don't think Bhutan is going to have any advantage through the MOU because they don't even have any diplomatic relations with China. And if we go back a bit like 4 years, in 2017, the Doklam standoff happened exactly at the tri-junction of India, Bhutan, and China. So Bhutan has its own concerns, but I definitely, looking at the larger picture of recent Chinese affairs, I don't think China is going to regard Bhutanese concerns.
What has been the impact of border clashes on bilateral relations between India and China?
We haven't seen any informal talks or informal summits between the highest level, political level, between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping. We have seen the first informal summit in Wuhan after the similar standoff along the tri-junction between India, China, and Bhutan in Doklam. And the second informal summit happened in Chennai, in India. But we haven't seen similar summits happening or happen in the future just because of the recent clashes at Galwan and which are still ongoing, and we haven't seen any positive, optimistic way forward from the recent tensions. If you look at the long term, the relations are evolving and the border tensions are like very localized incidents. But in the recent 2 decades, or especially since the beginning of Xi Jinping era, the border tensions became, or the transgressions become very normal. But what makes the 2020 Galwan clashes very unique is that the loss of soldiers, at least 20 casualties on Indian side, and China acknowledged the loss of 4 soldiers on its side.
Coming up after the break, it's Taipei Fashion Week. We take you underground to see how one designer is changing the landscape. Welcome back to Taiwan Plus News. A reminder of our top story. Investigations are underway into a fatal fire in the southern port city of Kaohsiung, which has resulted in the death of at least 46 people. Former US President Bill Clinton is recovering in hospital in Los Angeles. The 75-year-old Clinton was admitted to hospital earlier this week after a urinary tract infection spread to his bloodstream. His doctors confirmed the infection was not related to COVID-19 nor his previous heart condition. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company has confirmed plans to build its first factory in Japan next year. The world's leading chip maker says the plant will make advanced semiconductors from 22 to 28 nanometers. The chips will be used in automobiles, among other products. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said his government will give financial support to the plant, scheduled to open in 2024. An Indigenous film festival is launching on Friday in the southern cities of Tainan and Pingdong. Native Spirit Taiwan will showcase films from not only Taiwan, but also from Greenland, Canada and Tajikistan. This year's theme is Indigenous Voices. The film screenings will be accompanied by salons, workshops and poetry readings. Rick Glowert spoke to the director of Native Spirit Taiwan to find out her hopes for the festival.
To exchange our cultures and to also build up the bridge to connect with each other and to raise awareness of the international issues, both in Taiwan, Indigenous world, and also internationally. We can pass down the message from the directors and pass down the message from different villages.
And do you think Indigenous issues are getting more recognition in Taiwan at the moment?
Yes, especially the young people, because we got more ways to express ourselves and also our identities. So that's why for the young Indigenous people, we use different way and access to communicate to the people in Taiwan and also to the world. So I think that's why there's more and more youth actions in Taiwan to promote or to share the Indigenous cultures.
And what are you most looking forward to over the weekend at the festival?
I think the communication is really important. So to communicate through the films, and also for the non-Indigenous people, with the films, it's easier to understand and easier to have the more understanding about what's the issues about in Taiwan and the local stories from the Indigenous communities.
A graduate theatre art exhibition by Hong Kong students is exploring a moment of the city's pro-democracy movement. Titled Red Bricks, the interactive art installations present experiences from inside the siege of Hong Kong's Polytechnic University in 2019. It was one of the most dramatic moments of the near-daily protests. But as Rick Glowert reports, it also asks the question of who will protect these memories as freedom of expression dwindles in the city.
The bars at the entrance to this exhibition symbolise a prison. These pieces showing Hong Kong's struggle for democracy could get you locked up in the city. But this is not Hong Kong. This is Taiwan's southern city of Kaohsiung, where theatre art students at National Sun Yat-sen University are holding an exhibition. Titled Red Bricks, its curators wanted to explore the experience of the hundreds of student protesters under siege by police at Hong Kong's Polytechnic University at the height of the city's pro-democracy protests in November 2019. Organiser Carly left Hong Kong in September 2019. Major anti-government protests were erupting across the city.
讲述说香港的历史。 香港的民主的进程，然后去到香港的抗争是怎么开始的，然后香港抗争者的想法或者是一些理念。
Originally envisioned as a drama, A COVID outbreak prompted students to adapt their work into a socially distanced interactive experience with artifacts, installations and audio stories accessed by QR codes. Since the major pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong sparked a crackdown on freedoms by Beijing, thousands of Hong Kongers have moved to Taiwan. Many come to study. Students here present Hong Kong's recent history, a city grasping for an identity of its own.
以他以前说的一国两制，然后港人治港，香港人可以管制香港这个地区为发想，然后也是以这个方法去理解抗争者为什么他们要做一些抗争。
There's a Lenin wall, post-it notes of support that popped up around Hong Kong throughout major pushes for self-determination. Now, even blank notes could be seen as subversive under a national security law imposed last year. The yellow umbrella became a symbol of the 2014 pro-democracy Occupy movement. These iconic red bricks, barricades and structures built outside the Polytechnic University to halt the police advance. And in a hidden corner of the exhibition, a flame flickers. Despite the crackdown, the Hong Kong movement lives on.
不管是你还在香港，或者是你已经移民离开香港，你在其他地方，其实你有这一份记忆，你有这样的照片，或是影片，或是文字的记录也好，那个也是香港的东西。你在哪里，你都要保管好这样的东西。
Nearly every week brings another directive from the Hong Kong government to stifle free expression in the city. This exhibition is a sign that democratic Taiwan may take up the mantle of preserving these Hong Kong stories. Alex Chen and Rick Loward for TaiwanPlus.
It's Taipei Fashion Week and designers will be showcasing their creations in some of the glitziest venues across town. But one fashion designer has taken his catwalk underground to highlight fashion's impact on the environment. Sandy Chi explains.
Held twice per year, Taipei Fashion Week is one of the most important dates in the country's fashion calendar. The latest edition is taking things underground, transforming parts of the city's subway into a venue fit to showcase the latest styles. Taiwanese designer Huang Shishun came up with the idea of using a station platform instead of a catwalk to spotlight his sustainable fashion brand, #Demore.
其实我觉得有讯时尚它不应该只有在 runway 上面，它应该需要出现在台北的街头生活，是我们生活中的场景。
#Demore's partnership with Taipei Metro is showing what can be achieved using 100% recycled fabrics from previous season's stock. Huang said he hopes the event will raise awareness about overproduction in the fashion industry, as well as introduce his brand to a wider audience. Taipei Fashion Week is set to continue to October 18th at venues around the city. Bill Kong and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
And from traditional to futuristic, scientists in Japan are cooking up a new way to produce the country's famous Wagyu beef in a laboratory. Researchers from Osaka University are using 3D bioprinters and bovine stem cells to culture the delicacy. Wagyu beef is known for its distinctive fat marbling. The goal of the team is to make a cultured product that can stand up to the original. Another goal is to make the beef cheaper. It's not unheard of for the meat to cost over $200 a pound at some restaurants. However, the team has their work cut out for them. It currently costs nearly $90 to produce just a single gram of the lab-grown Wagyu. Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus. We'll leave you with some images of this giant puppet girl representing a Syrian girl to raise awareness of the difficulties of migrants. The puppet is crossing through Europe and has just arrived in Paris. Stay safe and see you next time.